So I powered through most of Dororo over the weekend because the last episode aired on Monday, and I wanted to get a video out while it was still relevant. And as I watched it, I could feel all the pieces coming together as the idea slowly formed in my head. I'm no stranger to Tezuka's darker works, having been exposed to both MW and Blackjack well before watching Dororo, so I wouldn't say I was surprised by how dark it got, but rather by how well executed its ideas are, thus strengthening their impact. I've also been catching up on the other spring season shows I don't have video ideas for yet. One being an immensely underexposed shonen series called Gunjo no Magmel, a series that, so far, has consistently caught me off guard with how violent and depressing the imagery can be. And then I realized that these two series are actually kinda similar in their thematic ideas, as they both show an extreme disdain for humanity. I'm not sure whether either of them end positively at the time of recording this, but they're certainly not shy about laying on thick how awful humanity can be. And I'm really enjoying both of these shows so far. However, as I neared the end of Dororo, I felt like I had hit a wall. Not in the sense of I can't pull enough ideas out of this to make a decent video, but rather I don't want to make this video. At least, not yet. I suddenly fell into a position where I just didn't want to discuss such heavy topics, even though it's the most relevant show I could cover right now. This feeling has nothing to do with the quality of the show. It didn't get worse in any way as I watched more of it. Episode 6 gave me chills, and episode 15 showed me what direction the series would ultimately go in. Yeah, I know this stuff's been done before, though technically Tezuka might have done it first anyway, but it's how well it's handled that kept me invested. And yet, I just didn't have it in me to discuss Dororo's tragic themes regarding humanity and the depths to which humans will sink to achieve their desires. And it's not just Dororo. In a much broader sense, I've inadvertently overwhelmed myself with these ideas. Dororo and Gunjo no Magmel were the spearheads of it. Memories of the Tanya the Evil movie are still fresh in my mind, and I had to rewatch the TV series to make last week's video. I finally finished my rewatch of the Chimera Ant arc from Hunter x Hunter with my dad, which left us both in a state of what I can only describe as total despair. And to a lesser extent, shows like Sarazanmai, Mob Psycho 100, and Zoku Owari Monogatari all touch on this idea. This notion that humans kinda suck has become overwhelming, and to quote Mr. Cynical, overdone. Combined with events within my own life, this constant wall of negativity from the media I've been consuming became almost suffocating. And I abhorred the notion of putting out a Dororo video this week because it would only make me more unhappy. And then I remembered that I was like 15 episodes behind on this year's PreCure. And almost immediately upon starting episode 7, I could feel the dread and tension draining out of me. It wasn't a particularly memorable episode. They spent most of it trying to fix a spaceship and barely did any fighting, but I think that's exactly the kind of episode I needed. Something to decompress and soothe my troubled mind, filled with thoughts of uncaring feudal lords trampling their citizens underfoot as they acquire more power, and wild animals mercilessly slaughtered by humans for no good reason. Then I went into work immediately afterwards, walking into what was apparently a shit show that the other staff couldn't keep up with, and I just calmly waltzed around filling orders and humming the PreCure OP for like 2 hours. It was like I had entered an entirely different world that thrived on positivity, wonder, and goodwill, and it felt so unbelievably good. Escapism in its purest form, as opposed to Dororo's bleak philosophical realism. But the weirdest part is when these two entirely different shows tackled a very similar question in entirely different ways. Is it right to severely inconvenience others in order to benefit yourself? Dororo's entire second half seems to be based around this question. Is it morally right for Hyakimaru to regain his body by killing demons if it means bringing disaster to his father's domain and all of its citizens? It's a tough question that is slowly built up in almost every episode after the show's midpoint, further detailing how Hyakimaru is walking a path of destruction, exposing new sides to human-demon relationships and whether he is justified in destroying said relationships. And presumably it will deliver a final answer to this question by the end of the series based on the events of the story, or perhaps even leave it ambiguous so the viewers can draw their own conclusions. Meanwhile, PreCure takes precisely 2.5 minutes to answer basically the same question in episode 8. Do the PreCure have the right to take the star color pen from the inhabitants of planet Kennel without permission simply because they need it more? The answer, according to Elena, is a hard no. Even if it would benefit them significantly more, they don't have the right to take something from someone else. And that's the end of the discussion, forcing the others who tried to pressure Elena into taking it to rethink their logic and understand why they were wrong. And in a sense, neither of these approaches are wrong because they both have entirely different goals. For Dororo, the goal seems to be forcing the viewer into a position of discomfort and getting them to think about this question and whether their own sense of right and wrong is valid by comparison. For PreCure, however, the goal is to educate its audience on the basics of right and wrong in a way that is simple enough for children to understand. And both of these stances are important for their respective audiences. Children need to understand what the basics are, and adults need to understand that those basics are not black and white rules that can be decided with a single question. Beyond that, the simplicity of PreCure and other shows like it allows for a much wider range of ideas to be explored. 12 episodes of debating the ethics of demon slaying is great, but when that never-ending wave of hate becomes too strenuous, I can pop over to Pokemon Sun and Moon and watch the conclusion to an arc regarding mythical deities and community effort, and an episode that has like 100 Pikachu in it getting into Pikachu shenanigans back to back. Again, this is not an indicator of quality, but rather something that I am personally seeking from the media I consume. I crave variety, something I find in anime more than any other medium. So when I feel that this variety isn't as potent as I'd like it to be, my mind instinctively hits the kill switch and moves on to something more inviting. There's definitely nothing wrong with shows like Dororo, and I more than welcome the ideas they bring to the table, but sometimes you just gotta stop for a breather now and then to remind yourself that not everything sucks. Cause when your place of employment is shifting over to new ownership, one that's likely going to have a stricter and more corporate environment, and you have to decide whether you even want to stay or try to find work somewhere else, when your town's water department fails to send a first notice for the 4th time in a row, and you contemplate suing your own city for all the delinquency fees you've had to pay, when Amazon fails to deliver a shelf you desperately need so your manga collection isn't just sprawled out on the ground, and you have to miss several days of work because of jury duty for a trial concerning a policy you have considerable grievances towards, all the while wondering if you're even going to get the days you requested off anymore so you can hang with friends that you get to see literally once a year, trying to force an idea for a video just so you can stick to a weekly schedule might not be the best course of action. Granted, you could say I'm doing that anyway with this video, but if all goes according to plan, this one should be much more therapeutic than the other option. And considering recent events, I think that's something we need to be much more conscious of when we create our content. I have not had the best week, and it probably won't even be the worst one this year. But I have PreCure, and I have Pokemon, and I have possibly dozens of other shows to temporarily pamper me with escapism while I try to sort all this shit out. That's all I have to say. There really wasn't a big point here other than venting and maybe try to explain this emotional phenomenon I've experienced, and it turned out way longer than I thought it would be. Next week we're back on track though, so stay tuned for that. Special thanks to Jan Rogalski, Rourke Tanjoin, Christine Seibert, Call Me Catlord, Ember's fave roommate, Eugenio Mendoza, and all my other patrons for their generous support. My name is Ember, and I'll see you next time.